to support nonprofits, right? Going to help them understand whether their programs work, how they can serve people better, what's the disconnect, and use the money, convince funders to give them more money to help people, but use that money and make sure that they really are supporting their communities in the best possible fashion. So that's kind of the genesis or the intent that I had with evaluation. But you know, life always has curves and different opportunities. And as I was doing my little evaluation business, I got a call one day from someone who was looking to recruit an evaluation manager or research manager. And that person recruited me for a position, and it turned out that it was a local utility company who needed someone from Michigan to work on energy evaluation. I had never heard of this stuff. What is that? So that was my pathway to enter energy. And again, coming at it, not knowing how our energy is generated. You know, I kind of knew, but didn't deeply know. But I didn't know all of the different interconnections, all of the choices that we make on a daily basis, and how that informs, you know, our fossil fuel emissions, how that informs jobs in a community, how that informs where we're headed in the next 50 years. So slowly I started to pick up through looking at energy programs and having to figure out how it all fit together. I asked a lot of questions, and I moved on from that to actually designing energy programs, saying, hey, we're not serving the right people, or maybe this business model doesn't quite fit. So I was always in the background working, advising on different energy systems and influencing, you know, how they do business. Now, remember that story I told you about my family and how important the earth is to our family's history and our shared stories. That was always floating around, right? But that's not something that I was comfortable with sharing. I didn't feel like that was something that would be heard within those boardrooms, or if I'm giving a presentation with a lot of statistics and data, that would be valued in the same way. I, in fact, know still that it is not valued in the same way. So I would find other ways to value it. You know, instead of talking about, you know, why this species is important, or why these trees are important, or why this land should not be polluted, I started to monetize some of those things in business models. I started to tie them in with statistical validity into the business practices. And that's when I started to see stuff change. So I never said, you know, what I believe or what my values were. What I did was figure out a way to translate the perspectives that I saw were missing from those rooms. And, you know, just honestly, when I walked into those rooms, nobody ever looked like me. I'm a millennial. I'm a woman of color, clearly. And those rooms do not have a lot of people who look like me. So already there was some attention that I wasn't asking for. And I was like, hey, how do I bring something, a valuable contribution to this discussion and help us advance our thinking? And so that's the way I did it. I never want to ever push my values on people. You know, mine are mine and yours are yours. But that's the way that I saw some perspectives were missing. And even in this work today, I know I don't know everything, and I welcome all voices to the table. So if you see something that we're missing at the state level, if you see something in climate policy, like, hey, you're missing this, my email, oh, you can't see the presentation, I may send this out, but I'll give you my email, and you can shoot me an email and we can talk about it and figure out how to get it work into that. So now I'm going to segue into, from all that into more of this job as climate and energy advisor, and how it's been going, what the goals are of the office, and where we're headed, right? So how do I do this? I'm trying to, there we go. Now I can see my presentation. So as Ryan said, the office was created in February 2019, and we have some huge responsibilities. They sound small, but they're massive. So the first one is coordinating climate response activities throughout the state. So, when I took the job, I was like, oh yeah, I can coordinate, I can get people together, but there's a lot of depth there. There's so much depth there. So not only is it within my office, we also have EGLE. So EGLE is the old DEQ, now Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. So understanding the systems in every division, how they're operating, how they intersect with climate and energy, and where we can build, right? So we're really doing a lot of ground up work. Then I work with like DHHS and their climate adaptation team there, led by Erin Ferguson, and figuring out what the synergies are there. And so it's been like that. Every department, DNR, MDOT, Michigan Department of Transportation, even the Department of Education, I've had the pleasure of working with them and Superintendent Michael Rice. So there's a lot of talking initially, a lot of activity, but there's a lot of ideation, right? But we're not just talking, we're becoming solutions architects. We're trying to put together all these different puzzle pieces, find out how we can support each other in building and growing in this direction, but then also support the state. So that coordination piece is huge. There's been, in the last year since I was appointed, a lot of internal activity that folks aren't seeing. So we're hearing people, and we know we have to get our stuff together internally. We are currently just beginning to reach out to our partners who we've been talking to all along, but haven't pulled them in. But we're getting ready to pull a lot of folks in to figure out how we operationalize some of the stuff we need to get done. The other part of my job is, which kind of intersects with that first point, is I'm advising state and local governments on how to mitigate climate impacts and adapt to climate changes. So I don't know if some of you saw the recent announcement that went out on Wednesday from our department, but we've announced Catalyst Communities. And what that is an initiative, multi-tiered, multi-phase initiative to support communities at the ground level. We'll be offering some climate trainings, and the idea about that is everyone has to know how these climate changes that are coming, that we're seeing now, are going to affect our communities. And we are approaching it from an emergency response perspective. We're approaching it from a public health perspective. Those are the top two things that when these climate impacts hit, regardless of if you believe in climate science, we have to have folks ready. We cannot risk lives. We cannot endanger people, nor do we want to. And so we're building up a training to share that information with everyone, to make it public. But most importantly right now in this short term is to make sure all planning and zoning officials, to make sure all folks who are making decisions about what our communities look like and what we're focusing on, understand that these impacts are coming. And not only are they affecting lives, which, I feel like the effect on the people and the effect on the community is massive. And it's affecting wildlife, but unfortunately, sometimes we have to go back to that monetization that I talked about. So it's going to affect a lot of pocketbooks, okay? Unfortunately, people listen to money. You tell them you're going to lose $1 billion on something, and their ears perk up, and they're like, oh, I got to do something. So we always throw that in at the end to get that attention and say, hey, if you do not invest in your community and your infrastructure right now, not only is it going to hurt people, but you're eventually going to have to do it. Mother Nature is powerful. So either you do it now at this cost, or you're going to pay so much more in the future. So that will be some of the framing on those climate trainings with Catalyst Communities. But check out that press release. We haven't leaked too much about it right now, but there'll be more information in the future. And the next focus that I'm responsible for is providing advisement on the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, renewable energy and efficiency advancement within the state. So that is really in my wheelhouse. Those are the types of programs that I've designed for the last 7 years. And a lot of energy efficiency guides. I know it's not exciting. I know getting an HVAC tune-up or changing out your light bulb sounds super boring, but it is one of the most effective ways, cost-effective too, ways of reducing our personal footprint and our collective footprint. So you will see a lot of emphasis on energy efficiency, and you will see a new emphasis on conducting energy efficiency in households, in communities that can't afford to do it, right? Like as I said before, I'm a millennial. I have 3 kids. I have student loans. You know, as much as I would want to be able to put solar panels up on my house or even get new windows, like it's not happening right now. So if in my position of privilege and the opportunities I've been afforded and am unable to do those things, then just think about all the folks who are not where I'm standing, right? Who are unable to invest in their homes in that way. That's, you know, I'm translating that into an opportunity. Our energy efficiency programs in the last 2-3 decades that we've had them throughout the country have primarily served people who can afford these things. One day I'll be able to afford a full window placement, but right now I can't. Some folks will never be able to afford that. So how do we frame that as an opportunity to get those emissions? And at the same time, we're helping families. We're helping families to reduce their energy burden. We're helping families to, an energy burden is how much money you're spending on your energy as a ratio of your income. So if we're able to reduce those energy bills for them, if we're able to make sure their homes are warm when they're supposed to be warm or cool when they're supposed to be cool, there are so many different reverberating effects of those type of investments. And thankfully, that's what a lot of folks in businesses are looking for. They're looking for those reverberating effects. So we will be having an emphasis for our energy waste reduction programs to think about those things. How do we count those things? How do we monetize those things? How do we put the benefits in a way that people understand in the current system that we're under, right? So that is my focus and how I am moving forward on what I'm supposed to be doing as climate and energy advisor. I already gave you a bit of my professional background, so I won't give too much of that. I'm gonna go into some of our focus areas in the first 6 months. So before I came aboard, Governor Whitmer already said that, hey, we are signing on with the United States Climate Alliance. We completely accept the 26 to 28% reduction in emissions that we need to hit. So we are already doing that work. And so there was a lot of benchmarking work going on to see, hey, where have we been? How much have we reduced? Are these numbers right? What targets should we be shooting for? How are we going to keep that process going so we understand where we're at all times? So that was here when I got here, and it was easy to kind of jump into it and make sure we are still going. Another activity that was already going when I arrived was the Michigan Climate Council. Now that is made up of a whole host of some of the coolest people I've ever met who have been working on climate issues within government on their own, moving stuff forward with absolutely no support. So these are some passionate folks within and external to state government. And the other focus is kind of figuring out what actions can we do next. So that has been the most fun thing that I've been working on in a very, very deep and long process. So I don't know how familiar you guys are with climate policy and climate action, but there's a lot of things that fall under that umbrella. I spent a lot of time looking at what other states were doing, talking to other states, talking to other countries. The EU has amazing things happening there. And I was always thinking about what fits best for Michigan. You know, if we adopt a goal, how does that resonate with folks? How does that affect folks? If we have some new mandate in energy, how does that affect folks? So we've spent a lot of time figuring out how to place this in our laps in a way that makes sense for everyone. And I hope soon that we'll be able to talk more openly about what we've been working on and what the governor has proposed. There's some excellent discussion there, and you may see some of the fruits quietly mentioned by some of the departments. We have some solar projects, we have some renewable projects going on, and I hope to be able to come back and talk about that probably in the future. Now, I have said a lot. I've said a lot really fast because I'm excited about this issue and about this work, but I do want to take some time for some dialogue and to hear thoughts on the call, to hear questions, you know, what's going on with you guys and where do you see the need for climate and energy policy? What would you like me to know? So I will pause there and let Ryan facilitate.
All right, thank you so much, Brandy. I really appreciate hearing about your story, but also hearing about the great work that your department does. Really, truly, it's eye-opening as a transplant to hear all the good work happening in Michigan right now. So we've had a few questions in the chat forum. John Forslund asked a really great question that perhaps you could answer. John, would you like to ask it yourself or would you like me to ask it for you? Okay, the question was, do all state departments in Michigan have a mandate to include climate effects and issues in their planning?
Currently, there is an executive directive that asks them to reduce energy consumption and work with me to reduce their climate impact. That has not been laid out specifically, but that's something that the heads of state departments and their teams and I agree on. We mapped that out within the first maybe 2 months of what that needed to look like. And I would just say stay tuned for that. I will say that Michigan is not like a lot of other states where you'll see them say, hey, or at least this administration isn't this way, but you'll see a state say, hey, we started a task force or we started a discussion on something. And what I've noticed with our team is we don't talk about, what's the phrase? Don't talk about it, be about it. That's more like the motto here. So I can say that, what can I say at this time? Yes, there are agreed upon activities that we are, and principles that we are working towards. We have a pretty good idea about what our footprint is, and I have not had any pushback with my discussions or activities with any of the agencies. It's been more like them coming and saying, hey, what can we do? Or, hey, we have this really cool idea. What do you think? Does it fit? So there's a lot of great collaboration going on right now. I hope that answered your question.
It sounds like a best case scenario. Everybody's just dying to work with you.
I hope that stays.
Me too. We have a few more questions. I saw Stephen Handler has a question in the chat forum. Stephen, would you like to ask Brandy your question?
Sure. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Sure can.
Okay, so I've been a little bit involved with one portion of the U.S. Climate Alliance. I work for the U.S. Forest Service in Houghton, and I'm one of the folks helping different states think about how natural and working lands fit into their U.S. Climate Alliance commitments. But I haven't seen like an overall plan from the state, you know, what levers are we going to pull and how are we going to meet those emissions reductions requirements? Is that something still being worked on or will be released?
Yes. So let's see where to start. So as you know, Stephen, the USDA umbrella is completely massive. And so that whole natural and working lands piece, that there's a lot of details go down on the policy side there. I have a counterpart in DNR who leads a lot of these efforts. His name is Scott Whitcomb, and Stephen, you may know Chris Hoving, who's been in DNR for a long time and leading on climate and doing a fantastic job. That has been one of the top issues. So I've been focused more on the mitigation side. How do we get these businesses to change direction to meet our goal? And they've been leading the natural and working lands group. So there is a strategy that we've put together. We know where we have to go at this time, and we're at that stage where we just need to make sure that we have the funding we need. Funding is always a big thing. That we have the partners at the table. But Stephen, if you don't see anything on that topic in the way that you expect by the end of the year, I would shoot Scott Whitcomb a note or me a note and just say, hey, where is this at? You know, there's this gap that we've identified. But our involvement with the USCA on that, because there's so many different areas we can go into, we have used a divide and conquer strategy. So some of the DNR team will pay more attention to that, and then we're feeding back all the information to each other and then having these discussions going. But yeah, I would expect to see a natural and working lands policy that aligns with our overall GHG reduction goals. Now I'm gonna touch on a few caveats on that. Like anything else, getting those GHG reductions, there's a lot of negotiation going on. So there may be things in there that not all partners at the table within state government want, or we know that there are some downsides to certain policies, especially when it comes to natural and working lands. So it is important for us to kind of keep that bigger goal in mind as we move forward, because we have to move forward at this point. Another hiccup with natural and working lands is in Michigan, we have a ton of private lands that we need to also support a strategy on and see if we can get our fellow Michiganders to jump on so that we can figure out how those two things go together. Because if we are only doing public lands, and let's say, I can't remember off the top of my head, but let's say the state only owns 20% of the lands, then we're capped at our ability to support any overall strategy. So we know we need private partners to tap in on this one and help move that forward. But yes, it is a big focus, especially for the DNR, in how we're reaching those goals. And it's also, honestly, it's a carrot for certain industries to have some policies that deal with forest, managing forests and stuff that they're trying to weave into their climate strategies. So it does kind of touch on that too a little bit. Did I answer your question, Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, it's good to know that something will be coming soon. It'll be interesting to see how natural and working lands fits in with, you know, all of the other categories in that overall plan.
Yeah, and I will say that you should see something from us by the end of the year that kind of talks about a specific program or initiative. It may not, we may not share how it fits into the overall strategy, but that will become clear as we move forward. But every piece that we're working on has been mapped into overall strategy. We just have a way that we're executing it to get it all done.
All right, we have another question from Brandy Joy. Go ahead, Brandy.
Hi, hi, Dr. Brown. I live in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and I don't know if you've heard about our problem that we have in the press right now, but we're in the middle of an environmental justice and climate crisis.
Did you email me this morning, Brandy?
Yes, I did.
I read it, and so why don't you tell everyone what the issue is, and then I will let you know what I've been doing about it.
Okay. Yeah, I was hoping that you could help advocate to the city the importance of climate crisis. So that was really what I was going to ask if you could help us with that. But our neighborhood is a predominantly African American neighborhood, and we live next door. There's literally no buffer at all to a paper pulp mill called Graphic Packaging International. And they have just requested EGLE to modify their permit to increase greenhouse emissions by 221%, as well as cut down 700 trees for their expansion for office space and utility lines. And a lot of these trees are mature trees that we need oxygen from, as well as they have captured a lot of these emissions from this plant, because this plant has zero pollution prevention in place. And I've never, for 2020 in a paper mill, not to have pollution prevention is very odd to me, as well as the fact that they have had 8 violations from EGLE with no enforcement, just, notices. And they have an H2S hydrogen sulfide leak in their clarifier and gas lines that they have known about for quite some time. And we believe that the hydrogen sulfide is what's causing most of our respiratory issues in our neighborhood, because almost everyone in our neighborhood that is within a half a mile to a mile from the plant has asthma. I have severe asthma, and I did not have it before I moved here. My brother-in-law developed COPD, but a lot of our neighbors have asthma or COPD. And so it is really important that we get environmental justice here, and we just need as much support as we can get right now.
Thank you, Brandy. Thank you for walking us through that issue, because I know there's a lot more that you could go into there, but I appreciate that you so adequately represented like the passion and the issue there. So I'll tell you first what I did after I got your email. I read it this morning at 7 a.m. and I started making some phone calls to learn about the history of our internal processes. And before I got on this call, I actually didn't prep for this call because I was calling Regina Strong to see, hey, give me everything you got on this, and I need to know what's working and what's going on so we can get some things moving here. So I can tell you that Regina shared with me, not the background on the permitting stuff, because we are relatively new to EGLE and permitting is not my forte, but that's something digging into to kind of figure out what is going on here, how we intersect. Now, there are some barriers in GHG mitigation that we're hitting at the state level. And so this is something I didn't touch on with my position, but we see increases like that in GHG emissions, but there's not a lot of regulatory bandwidth or capacity that we are able to just act on, right? So we look at something and we say, hey, that smells funny or fishy, or something doesn't seem right. And we have to go back through this process and find the exact regulation or law that allows us to act. And so oftentimes when you see us, when you're out there and advocating in such a powerful way that you do, and it seems like you're getting almost quietness back from us, that's what we're trying to figure out to do. How does this fit in, and how can we protect folks? So especially with Regina and I, we're doing all that in real time as quickly as we can. Now, that may not satisfy you right now, but know that you and I can have a follow-up conversation to figure out how quickly we can get this done. The other piece of this is that I am very familiar with the North Side. I live in Comstock. My parents moved us out here from the East Side, right up the street from Riverview when I was years old. And I will tell you that for everybody else on the call, those smells that come from down there and those issues are well known in the community. It's an experience that, you grow up and on a hot day, it doesn't smell good at all. Crossing over onto the North Side, rolling up your windows does not help you from escaping that smell permeating from your car. And I have, most of my cousins live on Burdick Street. That's where my great grandfather built some houses. And so I'm down on Burdick Street getting my daughter's hair braided. And it's an issue that we deal with all the time. So there are some gaps in how we move from, we know this is an issue. We know it's affecting people. How do we, one, like you said, get people to listen? And then how do we make systematic changes that are representing what's affecting people, right? It kind of goes back to what I talked about initially in these energy business models. We have this whole system that's been built and it has certain values within that system, but in energy, it doesn't adequately value the societal costs. It values like how much we're paying on our rates, what, you know, how much this is affecting jobs and business, but it doesn't value people. So there's like a gap in the system that we have to figure out how we bridge these two pieces together. And I am committed to working through these issues and pushing as hard as I can. Brandy, I do have to be honest and say, I got to check with my bosses to see if I can reach out to the folks in the city and say something from my position. That's a line that I'm very careful about walking, especially as a woman of color, because we sometimes get less latitude on those things. So I don't want to come, you know, I need to make sure that when I come to them, it's as a resident that I'm speaking on the issue and as an expert and not from my position, especially because there's ongoing permitting things with EGLE. So I will just be completely honest about that respect. So why don't you and I schedule some time to talk this afternoon? And I got your email. I was planning on responding after this call, but I'm glad you were able to jump on and share, especially issues like that need to be shared with everyone. You know, each community is dealing with something. And sometimes when we're in the community, it's affecting us and we live with it for so long, we're just used to it. And people think that's just part of their existence, but that's not good. And it's not good. I'll just leave it there. So if you guys have issues like that in your community, you know about them, like do what Brandy just did and share that widely. And I can say that from me making some calls, I learned that Brandy is a powerful advocate, and I'm happy that she's part of my community. Thank you, Brandy. And I like your name.
Thank you, yours too.
Okay, great. Does anyone else have a question they'd like to ask Dr. Brandy Brown? If not, I have one or two, but I'm going to give a moment for someone else to speak. No? Okay, we've waited out that awkward silence long enough. Brandy, maybe you could talk a little bit about how concepts of differentiated vulnerability or climate justice are, or maybe are not, woven into some of EGLE's programs.
Yeah, so we are doing a more concerted effort internally to educate everyone who works in EGLE on equity issues. So that the director is leading that. And I think the reason I start with that, rather than talking about what is existing in the programs, is that all of us are individuals first, we're people first. We come with a history and culture that is our own, and what we're coming to anything, whether it's, you know, our friendship group or our work, we're coming with our own perspectives. And so sometimes it's hard to not be siloed here and understand how something is manifesting somewhere else. So in any organization, in the last few organizations I've worked with and in designing programs, you know, that was something that narrowed our effectiveness in serving certain communities. So the director is leading this huge push for training on all of us, very open, difficult discussions we've been having about what we're bringing to the table and how we view our work. because ultimately our work product impacts communities. And that's where that differentiation comes in for climate justice or anything else. So we need to first recognize ourselves, be aware of ourselves, be aware of our biases and how we are acting or not acting within the narrow parameters that we have. And that's where moving on climate justice is impactful. Now, when we're stepping back and looking at environmental justice in the framework of climate and climate policy and how the state is moving, I can tell you that as a woman of color, like that's always something I have to live through every day. So in my work, it's represented, but you're right, it needs to be addressed from a policy action, or it needs to be woven in so that climate justice is not left behind. So to make sure that we're weaving that stuff in, I've been regularly meeting with Regina Strong, who is the Environmental Justice Public Advocate. Her office is responsible statewide for ensuring that we are addressing environmental justice issues like the one Brandy just brought up. And so at every step of the way, if I'm advocating for a policy or I'm saying the state should do this, we always step back and say, how are we including all communities? How are we bringing these voices at the table? So when we're proposing who's at the table, we want to make sure that it's open. I mean, Regina and I are like, hey, you know, we may have 10 people that you guys want, but this needs to be completely transparent. And we need to be open to criticism or people, you know, just calling us out or saying, hey, this is wrong, because not having those voices off does more harm than good. There are pieces of the climate work and the energy work that we are doing that we are specifically designing with disproportionately affected communities in mind, wherever they live, whatever the issue is. One example, can I talk about this example yet? But let me give a hypothetical example. So we have tools in our toolbox to deal with energy issues. And to kind of riff on what the example Brandy gave, that's air quality. That's a huge air quality issue that's affecting people and their public health. So what energy tools that we can currently use without creating any new policy, without having law or getting permission from anyone, what energy tools are cost effective but impact